The Blackforge salvage yard was a place most people would avoid. A massive, decaying complex on the fringes of known space, it wasn't the kind of place that attracted tourists or brave adventurers. Instead, it was the home of scavengers, drifters, and those who had nowhere else to go. The space station buzzed with life, though it wasn't the cleanest of environments. The air smelled of rust, oil, and ozone, and the walls were lined with the skeletal remains of ships that had long since outlived their usefulness. It was in this junkyard that Captain Kieran Cole and his ragtag crew made their living. Captain Cole stood on the bridge of the ironclad, his eyes scanning the debris field floating outside the station's massive docking bay. His ship wasn't much, just a modified freighter with a few extra guns and makeshift engines, but it had kept them alive for years. The ironclad had been through more than its fair share of battles, most of them with pirates or rival salvage crews, and it showed in its scratched hull and mismatched components. But for Cole and his crew, it was home. "We've got a new lead, Cap," Emily Winters called out, her voice crackling over the intercom. She was the ship's chief engineer, and unlike most of the crew, she had a knack for finding the hidden value in things others had long since written off. Kieran pressed a button on his console, bringing up the coordinates. "Another junk haul." "Not exactly," Emily replied. "This one's special. Something big, out past the fringes of the asteroid belt. It's not showing up on any regular scans, but I've run a few of my own, and there's something massive hiding out there." Kieran raised an eyebrow. "Massive, you say? Like how massive?" Emily's voice was a mix of excitement and disbelief. "Think battleship-sized, maybe bigger. And from the looks of it, ancient, possibly predating any known military tech." Kieran's pulse quickened. Ancient tech was the stuff of legends, the kind of things that could change everything. Salvaging an old battleship could mean enough credits to retire on a tropical moon. It could also mean power, something that could put their little crew on the map. "Plot a course. We're going after it." The ironclad powered up, its engines sputtering as it pushed forward, cutting through the debris field and heading toward the coordinates Emily had pinpointed. The crew was used to dangerous salvage missions, but this one felt different. Something about it called to them. As they neared the location, they finally saw it, a hulking, battered warship drifting in the vacuum of space. It was unlike anything they'd ever seen. A mix of alien alloys and military-grade tech, its outer hull was scarred from years of battle, but beneath the damage, the ship looked intact. There were no signs of life. No radio signals, just the ghostly presence of a ship that had long since been abandoned. "Shit," muttered Kieran, his voice barely above a whisper. "This is bigger than we thought." Emily's voice came through again, full of anticipation. "I'm detecting something strange, Captain. This ship, it's old, really old, but it has power, almost like it's been waiting for someone to find it." "Let's make sure we're the ones to take it," Kieran replied, his voice laced with excitement. "Prepare a boarding party. We're going in." The crew scrambled into action. Kieran's heart raced as he geared up for the mission. This was no ordinary salvage operation. It was a chance to claim something that could change their fates forever. As the ironclad drew closer, Kieran's thoughts wandered. Could this ship hold the key to something greater? Could it be humanity's chance to prove itself in the galaxy, to show that even the smallest, most overlooked species could rise to power? He hoped so. The air was thick with tension as the crew prepared to board the ghostly warship. No one knew what to expect, but one thing was certain: they had just stumbled upon something extraordinary. And no matter what it took, they would claim it. "Let's make history," Kieran muttered under his breath as he motioned for his team to follow him. The Aegis, as the old warship was named, would soon reveal its secrets, but would humanity's ingenuity be enough to tame it? Only time would tell. The Aegis loomed in front of them, its once glorious hull now battered and scarred. As Kieran Cole and his crew stepped onto the ghostly deck of the ancient ship, a shiver ran down their spines. The Aegis wasn't just a ship, it was a monument to a lost civilization. Its dark corridors seemed to whisper, and strange lights flickered dimly across its massive frame. Whatever had happened to its creators, it had left the ship abandoned, drifting in the farthest reaches of space, a relic forgotten by time. But now, it was theirs. The crew's first task was simple: assess the damage. They split into teams, each one assigned to different sections of the ship. Emily Winters, the ship's chief engineer, led the charge. She had a natural gift for understanding how things worked, even when those things defied logic. If there was anyone who could make sense of this alien technology, it was her. "What's the verdict?" Kieran asked, his voice crackling over the comms as he made his way through the ship's vast hallways. Emily's response came a few minutes later, her voice filled with awe. "Captain, you're not going to believe this. The core is still active. Sort of. The ship's main reactor is alive, but it's dormant. It's like it's been waiting for someone to activate it." Kieran's heart skipped a beat. "Dormant, you say? What do you mean waiting?" Emily's tone turned serious. "It's designed to run on an alien energy source, something that's beyond anything we've ever encountered. If we can get this working, it could power the Aegis for centuries. We're talking about enough energy to run an entire fleet." That was enough to make Kieran's pulse race. A power source like that would make the Aegis not just a formidable ship, it would make it a weapon of unimaginable power. But with potential came peril. They didn't understand the full extent of the technology yet. They didn't even know how much of it still worked. While Emily worked on the reactor, Kieran and the others explored the ship. The sheer size of the Aegis was overwhelming. It wasn't just large, it was massive, with corridors that seemed to stretch endlessly, storage bays big enough to house entire fleets of smaller ships, and weapons systems that had been designed to decimate armies. But everything was broken. The ship had been pieced together over centuries, its systems fragmented and incomplete. No one had seen anything like it, and no one had maintained it. But the Aegis wasn't just a jumble of alien technology. The crew began to realize it was something more, a war machine that had been built with one purpose in mind: to conquer. The weapon systems were unlike anything the crew had ever seen, some parts beyond human comprehension, while others seemed almost tailored to human ingenuity. "Emily, I'm seeing something here. The ship's weapon systems, they're still functional," said Lieutenant Jake Matthews, one of the ship's gunners. His voice crackled through Kieran's earpiece. "The targeting systems are active. We could be ready to fire in under an hour. I don't know how this is possible, but it's working." Kieran stopped in his tracks, staring at the ancient control panels. His mind raced. The Aegis wasn't just a salvage. It was a game changer. But they were far from home, and they didn't know what dangers this ship might still hold. How much could they trust it? How much of it would fight them every step of the way? "If we get the power core back online and these systems working, we'll be able to defend ourselves against anyone," Emily continued, her voice filled with both excitement and caution. "But we need to be careful. This ship wasn't built for peace." Kieran thought about the pirates, the ones who had been hunting them down for months, and the looming shadow of the galactic powers who ruled with iron fists. The Aegis could give them the upper hand, but it would also make them a target. "Understood. Let's move forward, but we need to stay sharp. This ship might be a treasure, but we don't know what else is lurking in its halls," Kieran said, his tone steady, but with a hint of urgency. The crew spent the next few days working around the clock. Emily managed to bypass the ship's alien security systems, unlocking compartments that had been sealed for millennia. Slowly, they brought the Aegis back to life. The power core hummed to life with a deep, resonant vibration that rattled the ship's skeletal frame. The first test of the reactor's power sent a jolt through the entire ship, lighting up the control panels, reviving the ship's communication systems. But even as the Aegis began to wake, Kieran couldn't shake the feeling that this wasn't just about salvaging the ship. This was something far greater, something they might not fully understand yet. They had resurrected a beast, and now they would have to learn to control it before it learned to control them. The future of humanity, and perhaps the galaxy, now rested on the shoulders of the crew of the Ironclad. What they did next would define their place in the universe. The Aegis was no longer a forgotten relic of an ancient war. Under the careful hands of Emily Winters and the rest of the crew, it had become a fully functional warship once more. The ship's once dark corridors now hummed with energy, and the flickering lights that had once seemed like ghosts now shone brightly. The Ironclad crew had done the impossible. They had resurrected a dead ship. But despite all the progress, there was one question that remained. Would it be enough to survive in the brutal galaxy they called home? Captain Kieran Cole stood on the bridge, staring out into the void of space, his eyes locked on the distant horizon. The Aegis was ready for its first test flight. The weapons were online, the engines were purring, and the ship's alien power core pulsed with an unsettling hum, sending waves of power through the ship's systems. It was a beast waiting to be unleashed, but there was a certain dread in Kieran's gut. They had no idea what they were really dealing with. "Captain, all systems are go." Emily's voice came through the comms. "We're ready for launch." Kieran took a deep breath. "All right, let's make sure the Aegis is more than just a showpiece. Run the initial systems check, then we'll head for open space." The engines roared to life with a violent shudder that rattled the entire ship. For a moment, it felt like the Aegis might just tear itself apart, but then the vibration settled into a low, powerful hum. The ship moved slowly at first, like an old animal waking from a long slumber. But as it cleared the debris field surrounding Blackforge, Kieran gave the order. "Full throttle." In an instant, the ship surged forward, its massive form cutting through space at an almost unbelievable speed. The Aegis was a giant, but it moved with a grace that seemed unnatural for something of its size. The power beneath their feet was palpable, and for the first time since they'd found the ship, Kieran allowed himself to smile. "We're going to need a bigger challenge," Kieran muttered, half to himself. Just as the ship was hitting cruising speed, the comms crackled to life. It was the unmistakable voice of Lieutenant Jake Matthews. "Captain, we got company." Kieran's expression hardened. "Who?" "Vortex pirates. Looks like they've been tracking us. They're on an intercept course. And they're not alone," Jake replied. The tension in his voice was evident. "They've got at least 3 ships, maybe more. They're armed to the teeth." The Vortex pirates weren't exactly known for their subtlety, and their thirst for power made them one of the most dangerous groups in the galaxy. They were relentless, opportunistic, and they never left a job unfinished. If they had found the Aegis, they wouldn't hesitate to take it by force. "Damn it," Kieran muttered, pacing on the bridge. He had hoped for a quiet test flight, but there was no avoiding this. "Emily, I need weapons online. Now." "I'm already on it." Emily's voice came back, calm but focused. "I've bypassed the ship's old weapon systems. They're not perfect, but we've got a full arsenal ready to go. You'll have your guns, Captain." Kieran's fingers gripped the controls as the enemy ships drew closer. He could see them now. 3 pirate cruisers, their hulls patched with mismatched scrap metal, their weapons primed for an attack. They weren't here to negotiate. They were here for blood. "Take evasive action," Kieran barked, slamming a button to engage the Aegis' shields. The ship responded instantly, pulling a hard bank to the left. The massive ship's maneuverability still felt unnatural, but it was fast, faster than anything of its size had a right to be. The pirate ships opened fire. Blasts of red and orange energy streaked across the void, narrowly missing the Aegis' hull. But before they could line up another shot, Emily's voice rang out over the comms. "Weapons hot, Captain." "Fire," Kieran shouted. The Aegis' guns flared to life. The first salvo of plasma blasts tore through the vacuum of space, slamming into the lead pirate ship. The impact was devastating. The ship shuddered as its shields buckled under the force of the shots. Karen could see the pirate cruiser's hull begin to crack and burn as the energy blasts ripped through it. The pirates retaliated, but the Aegis wasn't done. The ship's alien technology activated at just the right moment. Shields flared bright blue, absorbing the incoming fire with ease. The enemy ships didn't have the firepower to breach the Aegis's defenses. "We're taking them apart, piece by piece," Karen said, grinning. The Aegis's alien tech seemed to hum with power, and he could feel it pulsing under his feet as if the ship itself was alive. The battle was fierce, but the Aegis was built for war. One by one, the pirate ships fell. Their weapons, primitive in comparison to the Aegis's, were no match for the ship's enhanced systems. The first pirate cruiser exploded in a spectacular display of light as the Aegis hid its reactor core. The second ship was torn apart by a focused energy burst from the Aegis's newly activated beam cannons. The third ship, the largest of the three, tried to retreat, but the Aegis was faster. Karen's hand tightened on the control panel as he directed the ship toward the fleeing pirate. "Don't let them escape," he commanded. With a final, devastating shot from the Aegis's forward weapons, the pirate ship was torn apart. The wreckage scattered in all directions, a fiery cloud of debris drifting off into space. The Aegis had passed its first test with flying colors. Karen leaned back in his chair, his heart still racing. They had done it. The ship was alive, and they were now the ones in control of the galaxy's most dangerous weapon. "Let's get back to Blackforge," he said, a dark smile tugging at his lips. "We've got a reputation to build." But little did they know, their victory would soon attract attention from far more dangerous forces. The Aegis's resurrection had set in motion a chain of events that could change the balance of power across the Nova Galaxy. And they would soon find themselves at the center of it all. The crew of the Ironclad returned to Blackforge salvage yard in high spirits, but their victory over the Vortex pirates had been more than just a battle won. It had been a declaration. They weren't just scavengers anymore. With the Aegis under their control, they had become a force to be reckoned with, a powerful ship in the hands of a small crew. The galaxy, with all its factions and empires, had just taken notice. Karen sat in the captain's chair aboard the Ironclad, gazing out at the dark void of space. The Aegis was docked in the nearby hangar, still humming with power, its weapons now a symbol of humanity's strength. But something was gnawing at him, something he couldn't quite place. "Cap," Emily Winters interrupted his thoughts, stepping onto the bridge with a serious expression. "We've got a problem." Karen turned toward her, instantly alert. "What's going on?" "It's the Empire. The Nexus Dominion." The mention of the Nexus Dominion sent a chill down Karen's spine. The Nexus was one of the most powerful galactic empires, ruthless and efficient. They were known for their relentless expansion, their ability to crush any resistance in their path. And their reach was vast, stretching across sectors, their influence felt in every corner of the galaxy. "Are you telling me they're here?" Karen's voice was low, his grip tightening on the armrests of his chair. Emily nodded. "They've sent a ship, a flagship, to be precise. It's already in the system. The Dominion wants the Aegis." Karen stood up, his expression hardening. "Of course they do." The Aegis was an invaluable asset, an ancient warship with unimaginable power. The Nexus Dominion wouldn't be content to let a rogue crew keep it. If they wanted it, they'd take it. And with their military might, they could do just that. "Where is their ship now?" Karen asked, already formulating a plan. "They're still several hours out, but they've sent us a message," Emily said, pulling up a communication from her console. "They want to parley." Karen's brows furrowed in disbelief. "Parley? The Nexus doesn't parley." "That's the strange part," Emily replied, her voice thick with suspicion. "The message is formal, diplomatic. They're offering us an alliance. They want the Aegis in exchange for protection and a position of power within the Empire." Karen snorted. "Protection? From who?" "Themselves." Emily gave a knowing look. That's what I'm thinking. But the offer is tempting. If we say yes, they'll provide us with resources, ships, and support. No one would dare challenge us, not with the Nexus backing us. Karen paced the bridge, considering the implications. The Nexus was not a group you could trust, but the offer was more than just a trap. They were powerful, yes, but they had enemies everywhere. If the Nexus was offering to ally with them, it meant they saw potential in the Aegis and in humanity. So, what's the catch? Karen asked. The catch is that once you accept, you're bound by their laws. You become part of their empire, which means their politics, their enemies, their wars, Emily explained. If we refuse, well, I'm sure you know how that goes. Karen's mind raced. Refusing the offer could lead to an all-out assault by the Nexus, and even with the Aegis, the Ironclad would be outmatched. But joining them, that would mean giving up control. He would be signing away their independence, becoming just another puppet in a galaxy-sized game of power. We need more information, Karen muttered. We can't make a decision without knowing what they're really offering. Agreed, Emily said. I'll send a reply, asking for more details. Let's see what kind of deal they're really offering. As Emily began drafting the response, Karen stepped away, his mind still spinning. The Aegis had given them the power to change the game, but the Nexus was an entirely different level of player. If they joined the Nexus, they could carve out a piece of the galaxy for themselves. They'd never have to worry about pirates, rival factions, or struggling for survival again. But if they refused, the Aegis would be the ultimate target, and the Nexus wouldn't stop until it had the ship in its possession. The decision was not an easy one. If Karen was to accept, it would mean bending the knee to an empire that had no love for humanity. It would mean losing everything that made them free. But rejecting them could result in their deaths, and the Aegis would end up in the hands of someone far worse. Karen clenched his fists, staring out at the blackness of space. What do we do now? His thoughts were interrupted as Emily turned back to him, a grim look on her face. The Dominion's flagship is entering the system. They're giving us a deadline. Respond by tomorrow, or they'll take action. Karen exhaled slowly, his decision weighing on him like 100 tons. He had never been one to back down from a fight. But this was different. The Aegis was humanity's future, and with it, they could either rise to power or be crushed by those who already held it. We don't have time to play nice, Kieran said, his voice hardening. Prepare the Aegis for battle. We're not going down without a fight. He knew what he had to do. There was no turning back now. The Nexus wanted the Aegis, and Kieran Cole would make them fight for it. The decision had been made. There was no turning back now. The Aegis wasn't just a relic of a bygone era. It was humanity's weapon, and Kieran Cole wasn't about to let an empire like the Nexus Dominion take it without a fight. On the bridge of the Ironclad, Kieran stood motionless, his gaze locked on the looming shape of the Dominion flagship as it slowly advanced through the void of space. It was an impressive sight, massive, sleek, and unmistakably menacing. A symbol of an empire that had crushed thousands of worlds, its black hull reflecting the cold light of distant stars. The Aegis was powerful, yes, but Kieran knew one thing for certain. This wasn't going to be an easy fight. Cap. Emily Winters called, her voice calm but tense. We've got full power. Shields are online. Weapons are ready. Kieran's hand tightened on the control panel. Good. Jake, get to the gunner's seat. We'll need everything we've got. Jake Matthews' voice came through the comms almost instantly. On it, Cap. I've got the targeting systems locked. The Dominion flagship is in range. We can hit them the second they make a move. Kieran exhaled, his eyes never leaving the approaching enemy ship. The Dominion would expect a formal surrender or a peaceful parley. They wouldn't expect the Aegis to strike first. The Dominion flagship was close now, so close Kieran could almost feel the weight of its presence pressing down on him. Every part of him screamed to to destroy it before they could close the gap. But there was one thing the Aegis had over the Dominion: speed. "We're faster," Kieran muttered to himself, more as a reminder than anything else. "We just need to get in close and hit them hard." He gave the order. "Take evasive action," he commanded, his voice firm. With a violent jerk, the Aegis pulled to the side, its engines roaring to life. The ship moved with uncanny agility, avoiding the first blast from the Dominion flagship as it unleashed a barrage of energy blasts toward them. The Aegis barely managed to skirt out of the way, but the energy from the Dominion's guns cracked through space with a thunderous roar, sending shockwaves across the hull of the Aegis. "Shields holding," Emily reported calmly, though the tension in her voice was clear. "We've got a good angle on their port side. If we hit them now, we can breach their shields." Kieran didn't hesitate. "Jake, fire everything we've got. Now." The Aegis's weapons came to life, beams of pure energy streaking through space like deadly lances. The first salvo hit the Dominion flagship with devastating force, the shields flaring bright blue before cracking under the intensity of the blast. The Dominion flagship reeled from the impact, its weapons temporarily knocked offline. Kieran's heart surged in his chest. This was their moment. "Cap, they're not giving up that easily," Emily warned. "I'm reading massive power surges from their main cannons. They're about to fire back." "Let them come," Kieran said through gritted teeth. "We're not done yet." The Aegis danced through space, a predator striking at the Dominion flagship with calculated precision. Each shot from their weapon systems hit hard, striking key points along the enemy's hull, slowing their movements and inflicting serious damage. But the Dominion was no stranger to war, and they retaliated with brutal force. A massive burst of energy slammed into the Aegis, knocking it sideways and sending the crew staggering. The bridge lights flickered as the ship groaned in protest. But the Aegis's alien technology kicked in, immediately compensating for the damage and keeping the ship in the fight. Kieran steadied himself, fists clenched. "Report," he barked. "Shields are down to 60%, Emily replied, her voice steady but strained. "Hull integrity is holding. We've taken some damage to the port side, but we're still operational." "Good," Kieran nodded. "We're not going anywhere. Prepare for another run. This time, we hit their engines." The Aegis moved with deadly purpose, its guns charging for the next strike. The Dominion flagship wasn't going down easily, but Kieran could see the cracks starting to show. They were beginning to lose their edge. But then came the unexpected. Another ship dropped out of hyperspace, emerging from the depths of the system like a shadow. It was a massive warship, unlike anything Kieran had ever seen before. The markings were unmistakable. The Nexus Dominion had brought reinforcements. A second flagship, even larger and more heavily armed, was now positioned behind them, cutting off their escape. "Captain, we've got a second wave," Emily warned, her voice now tinged with concern. "They've got us trapped." Kieran cursed under his breath. The fight had just become a lot harder. The Aegis was powerful, but 2 Dominion flagships. It was a fight they couldn't win on their own. The decision now loomed before Kieran: retreat or continue the fight against impossible odds. Either way, the battle for the Aegis was far from over. Kieran's mind raced as he stared at the 2 Dominion flagships closing in around them. The Aegis had already taken a beating, and now they were trapped between the 2 mighty ships, each bristling with weapons capable of obliterating them with a single blast. "Emily, can we jump to hyperspace?" Kieran asked, his voice calm but tense. Emily's fingers flew over the control panel as she scanned the systems. "The hyperdrive is offline. We can't jump out of here, not without significant repairs." Kieran cursed under his breath. "Great. No way out then." "Jake, how's the target lock on the second flagship?" Kieran asked, trying to focus on the task at hand, not the rising pressure. Jake's voice came back, steady but filled with urgency. "I got a lock, but I'm not sure how long we'll last if I open fire. The second ship is massive, and we've already used up most of our firepower. Karen's heart raced as he looked at the massive warships surrounding them. The Aegis had already demonstrated its power, but it was clear that one ship alone couldn't take on 2 Dominion flagships, especially with the damage they'd already sustained. But he wasn't going to give up. Not now. "Emily," Karen said, his mind working rapidly, "you mentioned the Aegis's alien technology. Can we use any of its systems in a way that could give us an edge? Some kind of hidden power?" Emily hesitated, scanning the ship's systems again. "I'm not sure what you're asking, Captain. The ship's weapons are powerful, but they run on alien tech. I don't know all of its functions yet. There's still so much we haven't unlocked." "Then unlock it," Karen commanded. "Find something. Anything that could give us an advantage." Emily's hands flew over the console as she dug deeper into the Aegis's systems, bypassing ancient code and bypassing security protocols that had been dormant for millennia. The ship had hidden secrets, things even the crew hadn't been able to fathom yet. After a few tense moments, Emily's voice came through, more urgent than before. "Wait, there's something. There's an energy surge coming from the reactor. It's unstable, but if we can tap into it, we might be able to overload the Dominion's shields. It'll give us a small window to strike, but the power will be dangerous to us too. It's a calculated risk." Karen's mind worked quickly. "How much time do we have before their second ship opens fire?" "Minutes, maybe less," Emily replied. That was all Karen needed to hear. "All right," Karen said, turning to Jake. "Get ready to fire everything we've got. We're going to make a run at the first flagship. Emily, prepare the overload. We'll need to be fast." "Understood," Emily said, her voice unwavering. Karen took a deep breath. This was a long shot, a desperate gamble, but it was their only shot. If they didn't act quickly, they'd be wiped out. The Aegis surged forward, moving with surprising speed despite the damage it had sustained. The first Dominion flagship had already turned its weapons toward them, preparing to fire. But Karen wasn't going to make it that easy. He'd never been the type to wait for death. "Jake," Karen barked, "when I give the word, fire everything at their main reactor. Don't hold back." Jake's voice was determined. "You got it, Cap." With the Aegis moving at full speed, the first Dominion flagship loomed large in their sights. Karen could feel the tension in his chest. If they didn't land a hit now, they'd be reduced to space debris. "We're in range," Emily said, her voice tight. "Power surge ready. We've got one shot at this." "Now, Jake," Karen shouted. Jake's fingers slammed down on the fire control, and the Aegis's weapons erupted with blistering fire. Every gun, every energy weapon they had, blasting toward the flagship's main reactor. The Dominion ship tried to raise its shields, but it was too late. The concentrated barrage slammed into the flagship's core, tearing through the weakened shields and striking deep into the hull. For a moment, nothing happened, but then the ship shuddered, and a massive explosion rocked its structure, sending debris flying. The flagship groaned as its shields collapsed, and the core went into a violent reaction, sending energy pulses outward like ripples in a pond. The Aegis was caught in the blast, its shields flickering violently as the overload hit them. The ship rocked, the entire hull groaning as the force of the detonation shook the ship to its core. "Shields at 20%, Emily shouted, her voice laced with fear. But they had done it. The first Dominion flagship was crippled. It wasn't destroyed, but it was in chaos, its reactor destabilized, and its shields completely down. "Now's our chance," Kieran said, his voice cold and determined. "We go for the kill shot. Full speed ahead." The Aegis roared forward, the crippled Dominion flagship still struggling to regain control. The second ship was turning its weapons toward them, but it was too late to stop them. "We're not out of the woods yet," Emily warned. Kieran's eyes were fixed on the enemy flagship. "No, but we're not done yet, either." This was their fight to win. and the Aegis was going to see it through. The Aegis cut through the void like a blade, its weapons still locked on the crippled Dominion flagship. The energy from the recent blast had left their shields dangerously low, but they weren't finished yet. Kieran's fingers gripped the armrest of his chair as he stared at the falling behemoth, his eyes narrowed with grim determination. "Emily," Kieran said, his voice sharp, "how much longer before we lose our shields?" Emily's fingers flew over the console. "We've got maybe 5 minutes before they go down completely, Captain." That was 5 minutes they couldn't afford to waste. The second Dominion flagship was already moving into position, its guns charging for the next round of fire. If they didn't end this quickly, they would be sitting ducks. "Jake, keep the fire focused on their reactor. We're going to finish what we started." The Aegis's weapons systems hummed as they powered up once again. Despite the damage to the ship, despite the dwindling energy reserves, it felt as though the vessel itself was fueled by pure resolve. The ship surged forward, pushing into the chaos as though it was made for moments like this. Kieran watched as the crippled Dominion flagship tried to retreat, its remaining engines sputtering as the damage took its toll. But it wasn't fast enough. The Aegis was already on top of it, its guns charging with a deadly intensity. "Target locked, Captain," Jake reported, his voice steady but focused. "I'm ready to fire." "Fire now," Kieran ordered. A blinding wave of energy shot from the Aegis's weapons, tearing through the remaining defenses of the Dominion flagship. This time, the ship didn't even have time to react. The reactor was hit directly, and with a deafening explosion, the Dominion flagship cracked open like a shell. Fire and debris blasted outward, and for a brief moment, it seemed as though the ship had simply vanished into space, its massive form shattered and scattered across the stars. The bridge of the Aegis erupted in cheers. Kieran couldn't help but let out a small breath of relief, though his mind was still focused. There was no time to savor the victory. The second flagship was still out there, and now it was furious. "Second ship is charging its weapons," Emily warned, her eyes flashing as she analyzed the data. "They're targeting us." "Not if we can help it," Kieran muttered. He looked at the tactical readout, his mind working through every possible option. They couldn't outrun the second flagship. Its weapons were too fast, and their shields were too weak. "Prepare for evasive maneuvers," Kieran ordered. "We need to give Jake the opening he needs." The Aegis lurched forward, dodging to the left as the second flagship's weapons fired a volley of deadly projectiles. The Aegis twisted and turned, moving with all the agility of a predator in its element, but the Dominion ship was fast, its weapons unyielding. "Cap, we're taking fire," Emily shouted, her voice laced with urgency. "Shields are holding for now, but we can't keep dodging forever." Kieran's mind raced. He was out of options. There was one move left, a high-risk maneuver that could either turn the tide in their favor or get them all killed. "Jake," Kieran said, his voice low but firm, "we're going to need everything you've got. I need you to target their weapon systems directly. Disable them. No room for error." Jake didn't hesitate. "Understood." Unlocking on. The Aegis's weapons powered up once again, its pulse cannons targeting the massive warship's primary weapons array. Kieran didn't wait for a moment longer. He gave the command. "Now, Jake, fire." The Aegis fired with a power that shook the ship, the concentrated energy blasting toward the second Dominion flagship with pinpoint precision. The energy beams struck the flagship's weapon systems directly, sending shockwaves through its hull and causing the weapons to fizzle out in a cascade of sparks and fire. "Direct hit. Weapons systems disabled," Jake reported, his voice filled with satisfaction. Kieran felt a brief flicker of hope. The Dominion flagship was still intact, but now it was defenseless. Without its weapons, it was vulnerable. "Now's our chance," Kieran said, gripping the controls tighter. "Emily, we need to finish this now." Engaging thrusters to close the distance, Emily said, her fingers moving swiftly. "We'll hit them head on. I'll boost the energy to the forward guns." The Aegis surged forward again, closing the gap between them and the second flagship. The Dominion ship attempted to move out of the way, but without its weapons, it had little chance to maneuver. "Jake, hit them with everything we've got," Kieran shouted. The Aegis fired once again, this time unleashing a full barrage of its weapon systems. The blasts tore through the exposed side of the Dominion flagship, each hit finding its mark. The massive warship began to break apart under the relentless assault, its hull crumpling and its engines sputtering out of control. "Cap, they're losing power," Emily said, her voice now tinged with triumph. "The Dominion flagship is going critical." Kieran didn't wait for confirmation. "Finish it." The Aegis moved in for the final blow, firing one last devastating shot directly into the core of the Dominion flagship. The resulting explosion was massive, an incandescent ball of fire that erupted outward, consuming the ship in a flash of brilliant light. For a moment, everything was silent. The debris from both Dominion ships floated in the cold void of space, the deadly dance of battle finally coming to a halt. But Kieran knew it wasn't over. Not yet. "Status report," Kieran said, his voice hoarse from the intensity of the battle. "We've done it," Emily said, her voice full of awe. "The Dominion ships are destroyed. We've won." The crew of the Aegis erupted into cheers, but Kieran's mind was already on the next challenge. They had won this battle, but the war was far from over. The Nexus Dominion would come after them again. They needed to be ready. Kieran stared out at the floating debris in space, his mind filled with thoughts of what was to come. We've only just begun. The battle was over, but the silence that followed felt surreal. Kieran stood on the bridge of the Aegis, watching the shattered remains of the two Dominion flagships drift aimlessly in the cold vacuum of space. Their once imposing forms were now little more than a collection of debris, floating lifelessly, the last testament to the relentless fury of the humans who had fought against all odds. "Captain," Emily's voice broke through the quiet, "we've won. But this victory could be the spark for something much bigger." Kieran nodded, his expression somber. "I know. The Dominion might be gone for now, but the galaxy is vast. Other empires will come, and we'll have to be ready for them." Emily's words lingered in the air, heavy with the weight of what they had accomplished. They hadn't just defeated two of the Dominion's most powerful ships. They had proven that humanity was no longer just a small, insignificant force in the galaxy. They had taken on an empire that had terrorized countless worlds and emerged victorious. "Can we afford to rest?" Jake's voice came through from the back of the room. His face was tired but triumphant. "We've taken down the Dominion, but we've made ourselves a target. The galaxy will take notice of what we've done." Kieran's eyes flicked over to the tactical readout. The Aegis had sustained heavy damage, but they were far from out of the fight. The ship had proven itself capable of holding its own against the mightiest forces, but that didn't mean they were invincible. "We won't rest," Kieran said firmly. "We'll regroup, get the Aegis back in fighting shape, and then we'll go on the offensive." Emily turned toward Kieran, her expression thoughtful. "Where do we start? We've proven we can defeat the Dominion, but there are others out there. Smaller factions, rogue warlords, entire fleets that might see us as a threat now." Kieran met her gaze, his mind already racing through the possibilities. They could turn the tide, become a symbol for every oppressed world, every species yearning for freedom. They could build an alliance, a coalition of those who had been subjugated by the Dominion and other galactic powers. But that path was fraught with danger. "We need allies," Kieran said, pacing slowly. "There are countless worlds out there that have felt the weight of the Dominion's cruelty. We'll find them, and we'll unite. The Aegis is more than just a ship now. It's a symbol of what humanity can accomplish. And the galaxy is going to notice." The words resonated in the air, heavy with meaning. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about changing the balance of power across the galaxy. Humanity had shown its strength, and now They would show the galaxy their will. As Karen turned toward the star charts on the wall, a series of coordinates lit up on the screen. These weren't just random points on a map. They were the locations of known oppressed colonies, planets that had suffered under the Dominion's rule, systems that had long been forgotten by the more powerful factions. "We start here," Karen said, pointing to the first set of coordinates. "This is where the real fight begins." The crew of the Aegis stood in silent agreement, their resolve clear. The battle for survival was over, but the battle for the future was just beginning. They would not be the galaxy's underdogs any longer. They would be the fire that ignited a revolution. "Prepare the ship," Kieran continued. "We're heading into enemy space. The Dominion may have been defeated, but there are still tyrants to overthrow. The galaxy needs a new power, and we're going to give it to them." The Aegis powered up, its engines humming with newfound energy. The ship that had once been an ancient relic of forgotten civilizations had now become humanity's greatest weapon, a beacon of hope and defiance in a galaxy that had never believed humans capable of such feats. As the Aegis left the debris field behind and entered deep space, Karen couldn't help but look toward the distant stars. They were vast, endless, and filled with possibilities. But now, humanity had a voice in the galaxy, a voice that would no longer be ignored. The fight for freedom was far from over, but with the Aegis at their side, humanity was no longer a relic of a lost age. They were the future, and the future, as it turned out, belonged to them.